Indiana has been a largely Christian state since the late 18th, early 19th century.
Well, let me say first that Indiana is a place where religion took hold at the very beginning.
That's Jim Madison. He's a professor emeritus of history at IU Bloomington. He's also written about Christian nationalism in Indiana for the Indiana Citizen, and he's the author of 3 books on the state's history.
Deep Christian faiths and some other faiths in Indiana from the very beginning, but predominantly Christian, predominantly Protestant, especially Methodist, the largest denomination in Indiana, Baptist, Disciples of Christ, those are sort of the big 3, but other ones as well, who represented the people who came to Indiana at the very beginning.
Even though the numbers aren't as high as they were 200 years ago, the Hoosier population is still overwhelmingly Christian. When Indiana developed its state constitution in 1816, it guaranteed freedom of religion.
It is very explicit that all religions are most welcome in Indiana and that no religion is necessary. You can be an agnostic, an atheist, or anything you want to be when it comes to religious faith, according to the 1816 Constitution, and according to that first generation of pioneer Hoosiers.
But now, in 2025, Madison says many have tried to ignore Indiana's and the nation's tradition of religious freedom.
It's always been challenged. There have always been people in Indiana and America who do not want to honor our tradition of religious freedom. But that challenge has increased in the last few years under the title often of Christian nationalism. But the Christian nationalists seem to believe that their brand of Christianity, their belief in their God, ought to be enshrined in our government's actions, behaviors, laws, civil codes, that their notion of what America is, a nation based on their God, is so right that it has to be the rule of law in our nation, in America. So America is, in their view, a place where religion moves to the center stage, where religious belief becomes a center point, where you start with answering a public policy question. You start with the question, what would God want me to do?
As it turns out, Indiana has a history with religious supremacy, and today there are forces at play that are shaping the future of the state's relationship between law and faith. This is Red, White, and Righteous, a podcast about Christian nationalism from the WFIU newsroom. I'm Clayton Baumgarth. A key event in the state's recent past, blamed for paving the way to strengthening religious supremacy, was passage of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or RFRA, in 2015.
This is just a good faith effort in Indiana to ensure that Hoosiers have the same religious protections in our state laws that a majority of other states have.
That's former Indiana Governor Mike Pence explaining in March of 2015 that RFRA laws exist in many states. Primarily, they've put protections in place so people aren't forced to do something that's against their religious beliefs. Indiana's law had 2 controversial provisions that sparked a national conversation. One allowed corporations and individuals to file lawsuits in cases where they felt their religious rights were violated. The second allowed these persons to sue each other over these violations without the government being part of the suit. RFRA opponents said these provisions promoted discrimination against the LGBTQ+ community by making it easy to win court cases by citing religious beliefs. Here's then House Minority Leader Scott Peloth at a press conference responding to RFRA.
And I'm going to name a few names, and I don't ordinarily do that, but we know who the anti-equality advocates are in the State House. It's folks like Eric Miller and Kurt Smith and Micah Clark and others. The governor cannot satisfy them while also satisfying the demands of the vast majority of the state and the expectations of the rest of the nation. Those 2 things are irreconcilable. So he's going to have to make that choice.
Well, I think RFRA was a fundamental point in Indiana's history in the last generation.
Again, historian Jim Madison.
The context here that beginning in the 90s, some Hoosiers and some Americans began to think that gay people were not just immoral, but part of their business was to restrict them, to keep them from having full equality in the law and in society. And so they begin to pass laws and try to pass laws on gay marriage. That was a hot button issue.
Madison said former Indiana Governor Mike Pence's faith was one of the main drivers behind the legislation.
A deep, deep Christian, a man who again and again said that his Christian faith came first. Not his faith in the Constitution, not his faith in American values, not his faith in democracy, but his faith in his God, his God. And his God told him that gay people were getting out of their place and need to be restricted.
What lawmakers weren't prepared for, though, was the reaction of Hoosier business owners and residents.
They had no idea what the people of Indiana really thought about this subject. And what the people of Indiana thought was, whoa, wait a minute. It's not the government's job to tell us who we can live with, who we can marry, who we can love. That's not the government's job. And this is a long tradition in Indiana that comes up again and again, and sometimes bites these folks who want to force their views on us, bites them in the posterior. Get government off our back. This is a land of freedom. This is a land of individual choice. Don't you tell me about my love, about my life.
Governor Mike Pence joins us now. Good morning, Governor.
Thanks
Thank you
for the opportunity. To clear the air.
So was it a mistake to sign this law?
On ABC in
Absolutely
March of
not.
that year.
The Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
Multiple times, Stephanopoulos asked Pence to clarify the intent of the law.
So, yes or no? If a florist in Indiana refuses to serve a gay couple at their wedding, is that legal now in Indiana?
George, this is where this debate has gone with misinformation and frankly,
it's just a question, sir. Yes or no?
Well, there's been shameless rhetoric about my state and about this law and about its intention all over the internet. People are trying to make it about one particular issue, and now you're doing that as well. The issue here, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act has been on the books for more than 20 years. It does not apply, George, to disputes between individuals unless government action is involved. And in point of fact, in more than 2 decades, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act has never been used to undermine anti-discrimination laws in this country.
Sir, I'm just bringing up a message from one of your supporters. That was one of your supporters who was talking about the bill right there. It said it would protect a Christian florist who against any kind of punishment. Is that true or not?
George, look, the issue here is, is tolerance a two-way street or not? I mean, there's a lot of talk about tolerance in this country today having to do with people on the left. But here Indiana steps forward to protect the constitutional rights and privileges of freedom of religion for people of faith and families of faith in our state. And this avalanche of intolerance that's been poured on our state is just outrageous.
And multiple times, Pence dodged the question.
Final yes or no question, Governor. Do you think it should be legal in the state of Indiana to discriminate against gays or lesbians?
George,
it's a yes or no question.
Come on, Hoosiers don't believe in discrimination. I mean, the way I was raised in a small town in southern Indiana is you're kind and caring and respectful to everyone. Anybody that's been in Indiana for 5 minutes knows that Hoosier hospitality is not a slogan, it's a reality. People tell me when I travel around the country, gosh, I went to your state and people are so nice. I mean, this is not about discrimination. This is about protecting the religious liberty of every Hoosier, of every faith. And we're going to continue to work our hearts out to clarify that to the people of Indiana and the people of this great country.
Yes or no, should it be legal to discriminate against gays and lesbians?
George, you're following the mantra of the last week online, and you're trying to make this issue about something else.
The rest of the nation reacted quickly. Governors from Washington and New York banned state-funded travel to Indiana due to the law. The CEO of Salesforce announced they would no longer host events in Indiana. Angie's List, a contractor marketplace platform, canceled a $40 million investment in its new Indianapolis headquarters. The NCAA considered not hosting its Final Four tournament in the state that year. They eventually did, but some assistant coaches didn't attend. 9 CEOs of Indiana-based companies, including Anthem, IU Health, and Eli Lilly, penned a letter calling on the law to change.
You want to attract the best and the brightest people to Indiana to work at Eli Lilly Company? They're not going to come to a state that has this kind of law on the books. Young people just aren't going to put up with this.
The opposition came fast, and it was loud. Days after the bill passed, protests by Hoosiers and out-of-state businesses managed to convince lawmakers to pass an amendment making it clear that businesses could not discriminate when providing services. Pence had to acknowledge the perception RFRA had throughout the country.
I abhor discrimination. The way I was raised was like most Hoosiers, with the golden rule, that you should do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I believe in my heart of hearts that no one should be harassed or mistreated because of who they are, who they love, or what they believe. And I believe every Hoosier shares that conviction. But as I said, we've got a perception problem here because some people have a different view. And we intend to correct that.
The controversy cost the state $60 million in revenue, according to Visit Indy.
This hit to the heart of many Hoosiers. And in a very short time, the Pence administration had to backpedal, and they had to go back to the legislature and pass a bill that revised this. It was in some ways a very sad moment, in some ways a bright moment in Indiana's history. And since then, we still have returns of this sort of thing. But I hope, I could be wrong, I hope folks remember RFRA. And when they're trying to propose some kind of restriction like RFRA, they just hesitate for a moment and say, whoa, what do Hoosiers really want on a subject like this? What do they want from their government?
But laws reflecting this belief system keep coming. Madison cited Indiana's near-total abortion ban in 2023 and the increased use of publicly funded vouchers that allow students to attend private, sometimes religious schools. Madison, like many others, does not have a problem with religion bringing a level of morality to the government.
One of my favorite words is ambiguity. And anything that's important and consequential has ambiguity. Government policy, religion, religious belief, how you connect or don't connect the two. There's so many ambiguities, so many subtleties, so many fine lines. The lines are not black and white. They are gray at best, and they are moving all the time. And it's very difficult to say that this is the one right way. What I think we have to say is how can we move forward and respect as many different views as we can and still keep to our fundamental democratic traditions. And there is a place for morality in government. There is a place for ethics in government. There is a place for religious belief in government. But I don't think we want to go very far with putting particular religious belief into active policy. Because again, the question will be, well, whose religious belief? Which religious belief? Which policy? Who's going to decide that?
On a common point made by Christian nationalists, that the separation of church and state only applies to Christians as a one-way street, Madison didn't mince words.
The short term for that is bullshit, Clayton. But that's one of the many perverse interpretations of our Constitution, of our history, of our ideals. It was, of course, to protect the churches and to not allow the government to discriminate against any particular religion or church, of course. Did you remember the people who founded this country were really European in their origin? They were still very close to the place of emigration of their parents or grandparents or themselves. And they knew what centuries of religious conflict in Europe had done to the people of Europe. It had resulted in thousands and tens of thousands of deaths and immense suffering as Catholics and Protestants and other religious groups, Jews, were the object of discrimination and violence, or vice versa. And so the founding fathers were determined this was not going to be a Christian nation. They were determined that the churches would not have a voice in government, that they would be separate from government. Government is one thing, religion is another thing. We're going to build a wall between them and keep them separate so that we can go about our governmental duties of providing for the general welfare of all the people.
He says there's evidence of the separation of church and state in the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights.
What are our constitutional foundations here? I happen to believe powerfully in America's constitutional foundations, in our democracy, in our rule of law. I am as patriotic on those subjects as any American. But the Christian nationalists do frighten me, and so do many of the others on the right side of our political spectrum today.
In Indiana, a lot of groups on both sides of the aisle influence state politics, from the ACLU to the Chamber of Commerce to the environmental advocacy group Citizens Action Coalition. Another group is the Indiana Family Institute. In its own words, it does, quote, policy work at all levels of government so that God-honoring public policies will help Hoosier families and not hinder them. Representatives from the organization stood next to Pence when he signed RFRA into law. The Indiana Family Institute is also allied with Focus on the Family, a national organization most known for its anti-LGBTQ+ and reproductive rights policies. And while researching this group, we found something interesting. On its website, the Family Institute lists something called the Church Ambassador Network as one of the programs it offers. It's described as a ministry that connects state leadership with pastors. Its mission statement reads, "Our ultimate goal is to see our cities and state transformed through the power of the gospel." Josh Hirschberger is the director of the Church Ambassador Network.
And I am both a pastor as well as an attorney. And so sometimes people ask me how I can serve God and the devil all at the same time.
He's also the founder of the Good Citizen Project, a Christian political activist organization.
Welcome to the Good Citizen Project. Many American Christians now face a dilemma represented by the two flags behind me. You see, as Christians, we know that we're called to proclaim and live out the gospel in every area of our lives, including in our role as citizens of the United States. But that's easier said than done, especially now. Cultural pressure, political division, even in the church, and the culture wars have left many Christians conflicted about their role in public life. I launched the Good Citizen Project to answer those questions and to equip Christians to be gospel-centered citizens in post-Christian America.
Hey there. How are you? Good, how are you? Are you David? I'm not David.
But I know David.
Okay, I'm looking for David. Got an interview with him.
Oh, very good.
Nice to meet you as well. Hirschberger, as well as a church minister who is part of the Church Ambassador Network, met me at the Calvary Baptist Church in Greenwood.
I am grateful for the opportunity to work at the intersection of faith and public life, having been called into this when I was in high school. So grateful for the opportunity to minister to a number of our governing officials and impact public life here in the Hoosier State.
The network began in Iowa in 2014, and it launched in Indiana in 2019. Hirschberger says the program is now operating in more than 20 states.
So our goal at the Church Ambassador Network is to build relationships between pastors and governing officials for the purpose first of ministering to them as a person, but also partnering with them for the common good. We often look to 1 Peter 2, and in each meeting we share scripture with them and encouragement from the Word of God. We ask them how they're doing personally. We ask them how can we partner with you, and we pray with them.
Hirschberger says the Church Ambassador Network usually works with churches that believe in what he calls the authority of Scripture.
That particular belief does generally form up around organizations, so networks as well as denominations that are going to be more theologically conservative.
Hirschberger measures success in part by how many lawmakers he makes connections with. He says the network exceeded expectations last session.
I was so encouraged this last session. For the first time, we were able to post numbers that, in fact, we ministered, connected with 90% of Indiana Democrats in the House, 90% of Indiana Republicans in the House, 90% of Indiana Democrats in the Senate, and 92% of Indiana Indiana Republicans in the Senate as well.
Primarily, Hirschberger says he wants to support lawmakers during the busiest time of their year. Though the Indiana General Assembly is considered a part-time legislator, during the session the job is demanding. In 2024, the group considered more than 700 pieces of legislation in just a few months.
When someone signs up for that job, you are signing up for the high-stakes, high-intense job that it is, but sometimes we forget that they're people. And we've sat with some of the strongest leaders in our state government as they have opened up, shared their heart, sometimes even cried over what was going on in their life. And so I think as Hoosiers, we can all agree we need good people in state government. It is an absolute pressure cooker. And so what if just the pastors coming up and just saying a word of prayer? How can I support you? How can I help you? Can we grab a cup of coffee when you're back in district? Can help some of those individuals say, hey, this is something I can do long term and not just 1 or 2 terms.
Hirschberger doesn't care for or associate with the term Christian nationalist.
I find that label very unhelpful, and I do not use it.
He views the term as meaning an unbiblical worship of country.
So as Christians, we are called to be good citizens of the place that God has placed us in. Our ultimate allegiance is always to Christ and to his kingdom. We find that in Philippians chapter number 2. And so there have been times in history where a sense of citizenship in a particular nation state could be conflated with or even put under that allegiance to Christ. And I think if you have to have an example of that, if there's any particular example in history that clarifies it, would be in the German church right before World War II and even during World War II. They're literally rolling out Nazi banners in the local church. All right, so they're putting that at the front of the church, rolling it out, and essentially having pastors swear allegiance to that state.
He refers to the work he's doing under a different name, Christian citizenship.
I can say with confidence, it is our love for Christ, our dedication to the local church, that then compels us to love and serve our neighbor. And we believe that biblical principles are to be lived out everywhere, and that we seek the flourishing, the good of our neighbor based on the fact that we're made in God's image. And that's good news for us, but it's also good news for all people. So others may use that term in a different way. And so certainly we would advocate for Christian principles to impact public life.
Hirschberger also has thoughts on the separation of church and state.
It certainly did not mean that religion should have no influence on politics. So separation of church and state, but it did not bar the influence of religion on politics. I think primarily because it's impossible to do so. Almost every critical piece of legislation in that building is impacted by someone's worldview. So someone's morality is being legislated in that sense. And where we would land as an organization is we believe strongly in the fact that we are made in the image of God. Each individual, regardless of where they were born, what language they speak, their citizenship, their ability level, they're made in the image of God. And based on that beautiful fact, we should promote human flourishing as God created it.
Hirschberger says the Ambassador Network has made connections that eventually led to policy changes. He cites the CARE Portal, a program that connects the Department of Child Services with faith-based community programs to provide welfare resources in their communities, and the passing of a religious release time law in 2024. The release time law, signed into law by Governor Eric Holcomb, allows K-12 students to be excused from school to attend religious instruction during the day as long as it's off campus and self-funded.
And by the way, that's not just a Christian release time instruction. That would be religious, so other faiths could take advantage of it as well.
And while the Ambassador Network doesn't outright encourage pastors to endorse political candidates, Hirschberger says it does want pastors to preach biblical principles and encourage their congregants to be good citizens and vote according to those principles.
Yeah. So this is the main, your main place then?
This is it. This is the sanctuary, yeah. So this was built in 1986, and we're looking at some renovations right now.
David Cook is one of those pastors. He preaches at Calvary Baptist Church in Greenwood and was sitting in the room with Hirschberger and me during our conversation. Before meeting with Hirschberger, he was interested in praying with public officials after reading about it in scriptures.
You can't just walk into the mayor's office and say, hello, I'd like to pray with the mayor, because they're probably not going to let you do that. So I was burdened by that, praying for a way to do something like that. And then at Josh's initiative, he just called and explained what they were doing. And so that's exactly what I've been praying for.
Cook says he now meets regularly with several state representatives.
A lot of times we'll leave those meetings with their cell phone number and our cell phone, and we'll be texting each other and talking about how we can pray for them and what it is that they're passionate about right now. So it's led to several long-term relationships like that, where we can just regularly ask how to pray for them.
Cook's outreach is limited to prayer. He's never advocated lawmakers to change policies, but he does see the value in bringing a biblical worldview into the public sphere.
What I teach our people to do is to vote for what would be best for their neighbors. Identity politics teaches us the opposite, vote for what would be best for me and people like me. I tell them, look across the street, look across town, look across the country, and ask what sort of morality and laws, according to the teachings of the Bible, would be best for everyone. And we do think those morals are good for people, and we would like to see government laws written from that moral perspective, which is informed by the Bible, and that I can understand why that would sound to an average person like someone who wants to enforce the entirety of the Bible on the people, which is not what we're trying to do.
Left unchecked, some scholars, including Andrew Whitehead from IU and Andre Gagne from Concordia University, say the religious and political fusion that Christian nationalists seek to create has the potential to cause dramatic changes in our country and state by undermining pluralism, freedom of conscience, and democratic principles. Whitehead says he sees some cause for concern with the Church Ambassador Network.
My big question would be, do they serve equally? And I don't know if, they're only focused on Christianity, or is it all, okay. If they serve equally all denominations of Christianity and expressions of Christianity, or if they would only limit it to those that align with them politically. And in that sense, that would be troubling, because it isn't necessarily about, again, freedom of religion, but only a certain type of religion, and only wanting to elevate a particular expression of religion, or a particular expression of Christianity even. And so, folks connecting with their representatives is part of a healthy democracy, but only limiting certain folks that can, or helping certain folks connect with their representatives for some political end. That sounds more like a political action committee than anything that is interested in encouraging citizens to participate equally in democracy.
In his book, American Evangelicals for Trump, Andre Gagne focused on the evangelical supporters of Donald Trump, what he referred to as neo-charismatic Pentecostals.
I've worked a lot on Pentecostal and charismatic movements. And the reason why I work on Pentecostal charismatic movements, and my book focused a lot, evangelical supporters of Trump, focuses a lot on what I call neo-charismatic Pentecostals. It's because it's the most important expression of Christianity at the moment globally. And it's the fastest growing expression of Christianity.
That population is focused primarily in the global south, with one exception. According to the Center for the Study of Global Christianity, Pentecostalism is projected to grow from 55 million followers to nearly 85 million in the United States by 2050.
What happens politically in the U.S. will have geopolitical implications at the global level. If they have the opportunities that are given to them, and they could put people into political positions, they will seek in the end to create some form of hegemony and make sure that Christianity is preeminent.
And while not a single person interviewed for this series, including the lieutenant governor, said they wanted the United States to be a Christian nation, the path could continue to travel toward that with every law passed that reflects a more Christian morality. It reminds me of something that State Representative Matt Pierce said.
The problem is we have, even among Christians, many different interpretations of the Bible. We have people of other faiths. And so the question is, whose faith is going to rule?
The battle to determine the future of Indiana is only going to get more intense. Indiana saw the introduction and failure of House Resolution 53 earlier this year, which asked state representatives to submit themselves to Christ. Representatives J.D. Prescott and Bruce Borders also introduced House Bill 1231, an attempt to require the display of the Ten Commandments in schools. That too failed, but it's likely to come up again in the next legislative session that starts in January. Indiana Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith says he wants to see the Ten Commandments in schools across the state.
I want to see the Ten Commandments on the wall. I want to see the Declaration of Independence on the walls of classrooms. I want to see the Constitution on the walls of classrooms. It's because it's longstanding historical tradition. And so what we're doing is we're not really giving preference to a religion, we're giving preference to the moral creed of our foundations.
For religious leaders, seeing the Ten Commandments used to push a political agenda is hard to stomach.
It alarms the concerned clergy. It alarms myself personally.
That's David Green, a senior pastor and the president of the Concerned Clergy of Indianapolis.
We're committed to advocating, especially in the areas of education, economics, health care, public safety. So those areas that have always been a concern and areas that we continue to advocate for individuals, communities, especially communities of color.
Green says seeing this rhetoric in the State House reminds him of his upbringings.
I was born in Cave City, Kentucky. I grew up and have been exposed to the KKK. So I've seen people who are walking around with hats and hoods, but also carrying a cross. And so as a young person who had not developed in terms of theology or politics, you're looking at this thing and it clearly communicated something here isn't right. On one side, I got a group talking about I'm defending a country, and that's what we're doing. But on the other side, it seems like they create a lot of fear, and there's a lot of hatred that goes on associated with them. So how do you jail people who are on one end creating fear in others, demonstrating hatred and divisiveness, but carrying a cross? And so when I hear these things coming out of our State House, for me it's alarming because it almost takes me back to that. The only thing is we swap robes for nice suits. But a lot of the rhetoric is still yet the same.
Indiana has its own history with the KKK. By 1924, nearly 10 years after the Klan's national revival, Indiana had more than 250,000 Klan members. That same year, their power peaked when Klan-backed candidates won the governor and Indianapolis mayoral offices. The Indiana Klan Grand Dragon, D.C. Stevenson, declared at the time, "I am the law in Indiana." Green says, like the Klan, there's a fundamental mismatch of end goals for the world between the Bible and Christian nationalists.
As long as you're trying to create division, divisiveness, limit resources to certain individuals, then you're not being a Christian nation. Now, you may be a Christian nation in words, but when I talk about being a Christian nation, we need to see it in action. Do our actions line up with what our words are saying? Do we care about the homeless? Or do we just see them as pawns and we don't see them as our neighbors and as people? Do we see that there should be equal access to health care? Not that, okay, if I have enough money, I'm in one system, but other people are in other systems. Well, a Christian nation is everybody's got access to quality health care. Everybody's got access to quality child care. Everybody has access to living wage jobs. Everybody has. That's when you have a Christian nation in action. And we have to be careful that we don't take the flag and just wrap it around the cross and create a lot of confusion between what is true religion and quote unquote Christianity looks like, but we got the flag wrapped around it as though it belongs to just one group or one segment of the community.
Next week on Red, White, and Righteous, how the assassination of Charlie Kirk is accelerating the already boiling Christian nationalist movement. Red, White, and Righteous is produced by Sarah Whitmire and me, Clayton Baumgarth. Bob Zaltzberg is our editor, and Kathy Knapp provided research and sourcing assistance.